When this is over, may we never again take for granted a handshake with a stranger, full shelves at the store, conversations with neighbours, a crowded theatre, Friday night out, the taste of communion, a routine checkup, the school rush each morning, coffee with a friend, the stadium roaring, each deep breath, a boring Tuesday, life itself. When this ends, may we find that we have become more like the people we wanted to be, we are called to be, we hope to be, and may we stay that way, better for each other because of the worst. Many of us have been living quietly, slowly and gently for 3 months now. Since March we have been asked to stay at home, if possible, to limit our travel, and we have not been able to gather together for worship or any of our normal activities at the church. It's been hard for some people to stay at home. We have missed friends and family. The routine activities that mark the week have been in recess, and this has made the weeks drag on as loneliness and boredom set in. But things are changing slowly. Slowly restrictions are being eased. Slowly we are emerging from our homes. We can travel within South Australia. And some activities are resuming, carefully and with good hygiene practices and physical distancing. But the easing of restrictions is not a simple or straightforward process. Any business or organisation wanting to open up has many policies and procedures to develop, and for leaders and people to follow, and many decisions to make. While some are welcoming this move forward, some people are still feeling anxious. Some people, because of their age or health issues, or this cold, wet weather, are happy to remain behind closed doors a bit longer. Others are acutely aware that once restrictions are eased, the chance of a second wave increases. We do not want to be like Victoria, South Korea or China. And then there are the people who have just enjoyed the quiet, slower life and are now questioning what their return to normal should look like. Do they need to be or want to be so busy? As we enjoy the easing of restrictions, we continue to live in interesting times. On the one hand, it is exciting to think about life when this is over. But at the same time, there are some fears and anxieties about the slow return. It is clear that life will not return to our pre-COVID experience in the near future, and that some restrictions will be with us for a while. We are going to have to learn to relate to each other and gather in new ways. Today's reading comes from Jesus' commissioning of the disciples in the Gospel according to Matthew. It is the final part of an extended speech from Jesus as he sent the 12 to share his ministry and message in the towns and villages of Israel. We read that Jesus went all about the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and curing every disease and affliction. Jesus spent time teaching people and telling parables. He spent time in worship and prayer and having meals in people's homes. And Jesus cured people of their afflictions. Sometimes Jesus looked around himself and noted that there was much to do. He looked at the crowds who gathered to hear him, who came to him looking for healing and hope, and he saw that many were harassed and helpless. Jesus observed that there were many people who were struggling with life. He had deep compassion for them and their needs, but he also knew he could not help everyone. Jesus knew two things about his capacity for ministry. He knew he was one person and that he could not be in multiple places at the same time. He might have been the Son of God, but he wasn't a time traveller. And Jesus knew his earthly ministry was time limited. He knew that he had a limited time to share his message of grace, hope and love amongst those harassed, helpless and suffering people. So he gathered around him a group of followers, a group he mentored and guided toward joining him in and continuing his ministry in the world. At the beginning of chapter 10 in Matthew's Gospel, we read that Jesus summoned his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to cure every disease and sickness. The 12 were sent out with instructions to proclaim the good news that the kingdom has come near, to take nothing with them and to not accept payment. And Jesus warned them that it would be a tough gig. I am sending you out like sheep in the midst of wolves. Later in the chapter, Jesus tells his followers that family relationships will be challenged. In a culture where the family unit was very important, this came as a very challenging piece of teaching. In this section of the Gospel according to Matthew, we are told that Jesus was busy doing the things he was sent to do. And he has gathered around him a group of close followers who are learning through observation and listening what Jesus' ministry and message was all about. Initially, this listening and observing was done in the relative safety of hanging around with Jesus. The disciples were not in the limelight. They could blend into the crowd even though they were travelling with Jesus. They were leading a quiet and simple life. But then things began to change. Jesus wanted them to move, to start venturing out, to visit towns and villages with the message of the kingdom. This must have been an exciting and terrifying prospect for Jesus' disciples. They've heard the good news. They've witnessed the healing and restoration of people. And now they are being commissioned and sent to continue his ministry in the world. They have been told that it will not be easy. There will be restrictions, there will be anxiety and worry. Jesus' call and commission of the disciples concludes with a word about welcome, our text for today. The reflection from Matthew about hospitality and welcome is included as a word of encouragement for disciples in every generation who carefully emerge from the cocoon of the church community to join with God in mission in the world. This word of encouragement comes after the warnings that as Christ's disciples we can expect to be rejected, vilified, marginalised or persecuted. There will also be times when travelling, thirsty disciples will be made welcome, when we will receive a cup of cold water, when people will listen to and receive the good news of the coming kingdom. Jesus speaks about new connections being formed through the mission and ministry of his followers. He has already warned that familial relationships may be broken, that family tensions may arise when people begin to follow him. But this does not mean Jesus' followers will be lonely. The teaching goes like this: when people welcome disciples, they are also welcoming Jesus and God. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me and welcomes the one who sent me. In other words, a new family is created, a family of people who faithfully carry out the mission and those who receive the mission. This new family is one that is established and held together through the divine presence. Through this time of living through a pandemic, living with restrictions of movement and the encouragement to stay at home, we have had the opportunity to reflect on our lives, to maybe become more like the people we wanted to be, we were called to be, we hope to be. We have had time to reflect on our priorities, about how we spend our time, and we have had to find new ways of communication and staying in touch. New friendships have been formed between neighbours and relationships have deepened as we speak on the phone with people we do not get a chance to speak to at church. When Jesus spoke to the disciples about welcome and hospitality, When we go out on mission, he used the example of being given and receiving a cup of cold water. It's a very basic form of hospitality, but in a hot desert country, a cup of cold water is very important, a simple act of generosity and welcome. During lockdown, there have been many examples of simple acts of welcome and hospitality that have built connections and boosted spirits. Lots of phone calls and cards, anonymous gifts of chocolates and craft kits, donations to the little free pantry, the weekly prayer list and the prayer fence. Small acts of mission and discipleship, small acts that have shown generosity and welcome to another. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me and welcomes the one who sent me. As restrictions ease, some are anxious to get back out there, to see people and return to pre-COVID activities. And some are anxious about keeping safe and healthy and would like to stay at home. And others are looking to ease slowly back into our new lifestyle. Maybe there's a little bit of each of these groups in all of us. The 12 disciples probably had similar thoughts as they left the relative comfort of being with Jesus, being part of the crowd and going to the towns and villages around them to share the good news of the kingdom. From Jesus' instruction and teaching, we learn to go slowly, to accept hospitality and connection where it is offered, and to know that God is with us on this journey of faith and mission. Amen.